When he was asked why he did this, he replied that he wished to be busy like all the rest, and rolled his tub, lest he should be the only idler among so many industrious citizens. Such conduct is at any rate not sophistical. If Aristotle be right in describing sophistry as the art of making money, it is certainly not open to misunderstanding. It is quite inconceivable that Diogenes should have been hailed as the savior and benefactor of the city, and it seems equally impossible that anyone could hit upon the idea of ascribing to a piece like the present any sort of epoch-making significance. In my eyes, the greatest calamity that could possibly befall it. Nor is it likely that anyone will hail its author as the systematic Solomon Goldkalb so long and eagerly awaited in our dear royal residential city of Copenhagen. This could happen only if the guilty person were by nature endowed with extraordinary stupidity, and presumably by shouting an antistrophic and antiphonal song every time someone persuaded him that now was the beginning of a new era and a new epoch, had howled his head so empty of its original quantum status of common sense as to have attained a state of ineffable bliss in what might be called the howling madness of the higher lunacy, recognizable by such symptoms as convulsive shouting, a constant reiteration of the words era and epoch and era, the system, an irrational exaltation of the spirits as if each day were not merely a quadrennial leap year day, but one of those extraordinary days that come only once in 1,000 years, the concept all the while like an acrobatic clown in the current circus season, every moment performing these everlasting dog tricks of flopping over and over, until it flops over the man himself. May a kind heaven preserve me and my peace from such a fate, and may no noise-making busybody interfere to snatch me out of my carefree content as the author of a little piece, or prevent a kind and benevolent reader from examining it at his leisure, to see if it contains anything that he can use. May I escape the tragicomic predicament of being forced to laugh at my own misfortune, as must have been the case with the good people of Fredericia, when they awoke one morning to read in the newspaper an account of a fire in their town, in which it was described how the drums beat the alarm, the fire engines rushed through the streets. Although the town of Fredericia boasts of only one fire engine and not much more than one street, leaving it to be inferred that this one engine, instead of making for the scene of the fire, took time to execute important maneuvers and flanking movements up and down the street. However, my little piece is not very apt to suggest the beating of a drum, and its author is perhaps the last man in the world to sound the alarm. But what is my personal opinion of the matters herein discussed? I could wish that no one would ask me this question, for next to knowing whether I have any opinion or not, nothing could very well be of less importance to another than the knowledge of what that opinion might be. To have an opinion is both too much and too little for my uses. To have an opinion presupposes a sense of ease and security in life, such as is implied in having a wife and children. It is a privilege not to be enjoyed by one who must keep himself in readiness night and day, or is without assured means of support. Such is my situation in the realm of the spirit. I have disciplined myself and keep myself under discipline, in order that I may be able to execute a sort of nimble dancing in the service of thought, so far as possible also to the honor of the God, and for my own satisfaction. For this reason I have had to resign the domestic happiness, the civic respectability, the glad fellowship, the communio bonorum, which is implied in the possession of an opinion. Do I enjoy any reward? Have I permission, like the priest at the altar, to eat of the sacrifices? That must remain my own affair. My master is good for it, as the bankers say, and good in quite a different sense from theirs. But if anyone were to be so polite as to assume that I have an opinion, and if he were to carry his gallantry to the extreme of adopting this opinion because he believed it to be mine, I should have to be sorry for his politeness, in that it was bestowed upon so unworthy an object, and for his opinion, if he has no other opinion than mine, I stand ready to risk my own life, to play the game of thought with it, in all earnest. but another's life I cannot jeopardize. This service is perhaps the only one I can render to philosophy. I who have no learning to offer her, scarcely enough for the course at 1 drachma, to say nothing of the great course at 50 drachmas. Gratilus, I have only my life, and the instant a difficulty offers I put it in play. Then the dance goes merrily, for my partner is the thought of death, and is indeed a nimble dancer. Every human being, on the other hand, is too heavy for me. Therefore I pray, per Dios obsecro, let no one invite me, for I will not dance. Chapter 1. A project of thought. A. How far does the truth admit of being learned? With this question let us begin. It was a Socratic question, or became such in consequence of the parallel Socratic question with respect to virtue, since virtue was again determined as insight. Protagoras, Gorgias, Meno, Euthydemus. In so far as the truth is conceived as something to be learned, its non-existence is evidently presupposed, so that in proposing to learn it one makes it the object of an inquiry. Here we are confronted with the difficulty to which Socrates calls attention in the Meno 80, near the end, and there characterizes as a pugnacious proposition. One cannot seek for what he knows, and it seems equally impossible for him to seek for what he does not know, for what a man knows he cannot seek, since he knows it, and what he does not know he cannot seek, since he does not even know for what to seek. Socrates thinks the difficulty through in the doctrine of recollection, by which all learning and inquiry is interpreted as a kind of remembering. One who is ignorant needs only a reminder to help him come to himself in the consciousness of what he knows. Thus the truth is not introduced into the individual from without, but was within him. This thought receives further development at the hands of Socrates, and it ultimately becomes the point of concentration for the pathos of the Greek consciousness, since it serves as a proof for the immortality of the soul, but with a backward reference. It is important to note, and hence as proof for the soul's pre-existence. 1. In the light of this idea it becomes apparent with what wonderful consistency Socrates remained true to himself, through his manner of life-giving artistic expression to what he had understood. He entered into the role of midwife and sustained it throughout, not because his thought had no positive content, but because he perceived that this relation is the highest that one human being can sustain to another, and in this surely Socrates was everlastingly right. For even if a divine point of departure is ever given between man and man, this is the true relationship, provided we reflect upon the absolute and refuse to daily with the accidental, from the heart renouncing the understanding of the half-truths, which seem the delight of man and the secret of the system. Socrates was a midwife, subjected to examination by the god. His work was in fulfillment of a divine mission. Plato's Apology, though he seemed to man in general a most singular creature, tell it is 149, it was in accordance with a divine principle, as Socrates also understood it, that he was by the god forbidden to beget. Theoctetus, 150, for between man and man the myotic relationship is the highest, and begetting belongs to the god alone. From the standpoint of the Socratic thought every point of departure in time is eo ipso, accidental, an occasion, a vanishing moment. The teacher himself is no more than this, and if he offers himself and his instruction on any other basis, he does not give but takes away, and is not even the other's friend, much less his teacher. Herein lies the profundity of the Socratic thought, and the noble humanity he so thoroughly expressed, which refused to enter into a false and vain fellowship with clever heads, but felt an equal kinship with a tanner, whence he soon came to the conclusion that the study of physics was not man's proper business, and therefore began to philosophize about moral matters, in the workshops and in the marketplace. Diogenes Laertius, 2, v. 21, but philosophized with equal absoluteness everywhere, with slipshod thoughts, with higgling and haggling, maintaining a little here and conceding a little there, as if the individual might to a certain extent owe something to another, but then again to a certain extent not. with loose words that explain everything except what this, to a certain extent, means. With such makeshifts it is not possible to do such is the criticism commonly passed upon Socrates in our age, which boasts of its positivity much as if a polytheist were to speak with scorn of the negativity of a monotheist, for the polytheist has many gods, the monotheist only one. So our philosophers have many thoughts, all valid to a certain extent. Socrates had only one, which was absolute. Advanced beyond Socrates, nor will one reach the concept of a revelation, but merely remain within the sphere of idle chatter. In the Socratic view, each individual is his own center, and the entire world centers in him, because his self-knowledge is a knowledge of God. It was thus Socrates understood himself, and thus he thought that everyone must understand himself, in the light of this understanding interpreting his relationship to each individual, with equal humility and with equal pride. He had the courage and self-possession to be sufficient unto himself, but also in his relations to his fellow men to be merely an occasion, even when dealing with the meanest capacity. How rare such magnanimity! How rare in a time like ours, when the parson is something more than the clerk, when almost every second person is an authority, while all these distinctions and all these many authorities are mediated in a common madness, a commune naufragium. For while no human being was ever truly an authority for another, or ever helped anyone by posing as such, or was ever able to take his client with him in truth, there is another sort of success that may by such methods be won, for it has never yet been known to fail, that one fool, when he goes astray, takes several others with him. With his understanding of what it means to learn the truth, the fact that I have been instructed by Socrates or by Prodicus or by a servant girl, can concern me only historically, or in so far as Lamb a Plato in sentimental enthusiasm, it may concern me poetically, but this enthusiasm, beautiful as it is, and such that I could wish both for myself and all others a share of this, which only a Stoic could frown upon, and though I may be lacking in the Socratic magnanimity and the Socratic self-denial to think it's nothingness, this enthusiasm, so Socrates would say, is only an illusion, a want of clarity in a mind wherefore inequalities seethe almost voluptuously, nor can it interest me otherwise than historically that Socrates or Prodicus' doctrine was this or that, for the truth in which I rest was within me, and came to light through myself, and not even Socrates could have given it to me, as little as the driver can pull the load for the horses, though he may help them by applying the lash. 3. My relation to Socrates or Prodicus cannot concern me with respect to my eternal happiness, for this is given me retrogressively through my possession of the truth, which I had from the beginning, without knowing it. If I imagine myself meeting Socrates or Prodicus or the servant girl in another life, then here again neither of them could be more to me than an occasion, which Socrates fearlessly expressed by saying that even in the lower world he proposed merely to ask questions. For the underlying principle of all questioning is that the one who is asked must have the truth in himself, and be able to acquire it by himself. The temporal point of departure is nothing, for as soon as I discover that I have known the truth from eternity without being aware of it, the same instant this moment of occasion is hidden in the eternal, and so incorporated with it that I cannot even find it, so to speak, even if I sought it, because in my eternal consciousness there is neither here nor there, but only in ubique et nusquam be. Now if things are to be otherwise, the moment in time must have a decisive significance, so that I will never be able to forget it either in time or eternity, because the eternal, which hitherto did not exist, came into existence in this moment. Under this presupposition let us now proceed to consider the consequences for the problem of how far it is possible to acquire a knowledge of the truth. A. The antecedent state. We begin with the Socratic difficulty about seeking the truth, which seems equally impossible whether we have it or do not have it. The Socratic thought really abolishes this disjunction, since it appears that at bottom every human being is in possession of the truth. This was Socrates' explanation. We have seen what follows from it with respect to the moment. Now if the latter is to have decisive significance, the seeker must be destitute of the truth up to the very moment of his learning it. He cannot even have possessed it in the form of ignorance, for in that case the moment becomes merely occasional. What is more, he cannot even be described as a seeker, for such is the expression we must give to the difficulty. If we do not wish to explain it Socratically, he must therefore be characterized as beyond the pale of the truth, not approaching it like a proselyte, but departing from it, or as being in error. He is then in a state of error. But how is he now to be reminded, or what will it profit him to be reminded of what he has not known, and consequently cannot recall? B. The teacher. If the teacher serves as an occasion by means of which the learner is reminded, he cannot help the learner to recall that he really knows the truth, for the learner is in a state of error. What the teacher can give him occasion to remember is that he is in error, but in this consciousness the learner is excluded from the truth even more decisively than before, when he lived in ignorance of his error. In this manner the teacher thrusts the learner away from him, precisely by serving as a reminder, only that the learner, in thus being thrust back upon himself, does not discover that he knew the truth already, but discovers his error, with respect to which act of consciousness the Socratic principle holds that the teacher is merely an occasion whoever he may be, even if he is a god. For my own error is something I can discover only by myself, since it is only when I have discovered it that it is discovered, even if the whole world knew of it before. Under the presupposition we have adopted concerning the moment, this remains the only analogy to the Socratic order of things. Now if the learner is to acquire the truth, the teacher must bring it to him, and not only so, but he must also give him the condition necessary for understanding it. For if the learner were in his own person the condition for understanding the truth, he need only recall it. The condition for understanding the truth is like the capacity to inquire for it. The condition contains the condition, and the question implies the answer. Unless this is so, the moment must be understood in the Socratic sense.